Welcome back. In today's episode, we continue our conversation with Morgan Field. How do you know if your partner is a good fit for you? And what steps can you take if he or she is not a good fit?
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performers Podcast
with your host, Thor Conklin.
Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. We pick up with our conversation with Morgan, and we're discussing the need to be liked by others. You know, it's funny when you were talking about being liked by others. One of my core beliefs is if I'm not disliked by some people, my message isn't strong enough.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to resonate with everybody. And if I do, and I try to, then that's just a watered-down version that, quite frankly, isn't worth listening to.
Yeah, so that was huge in writing this book because it was so important to me to make everything that I wrote about love. And at the same time, I knew that my truth may trigger others. And one of the pieces of feedback, well, there were a couple pieces of feedback that I got about people who maybe knew the stories or knew the people of the stories. And they said, there's a part in the book where I talk about how as I shifted and changed and really expanded into my highest, fullest potential, as I went from constantly focusing on the problem and needing everyone to help me work through my problems and not trusting in myself at all and constantly calling my girlfriends to help me solve everything because I didn't trust myself to do it, I went from that to not having conversations about needing help anymore. They'd be like, hey, do you need anything? Oh, no, I've got it figured out. I'm good. Or like, let me navigate this myself. With one relationship in particular, it caused a big disrupt to the point where now looking back, I understand why. And I talk about that in the book. One of the things, it caused a disrupt to the point where, she was feeling very unloved because I was changing the rules of the relationship. I didn't realize I was doing it. And in the book, I said, looking back, I feel like if I had had more compassion and understanding, she had just had a child, and hormonally, I know what that does to a woman. And this individual was like, well, you could get a lot of heat for that because blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, first of all, if someone's upset because, you know what I mean? Like the heat for the hormonal comment, probably there's other things in that book that would trigger the living crap out of that person before they get to that page. They're probably not going to read the book. You know what I mean? Because that's something very small.
Yeah.
And I'm a woman, and I'm entitled to my own opinion. And, I may say things, even when you do interviews, when you're being quoted, when you have articles, people misquote you, and you just kind of have to be like, whatever, who cares? Does it even matter? And yes, totally. If I have a belief that is so fundamentally different than anyone else's, and it's very challenging, then guess what? That's where new outcomes come from. And so it's about really anchoring yourself in your own truth very unapologetically. That's a piece of the brand. You've got the epic part, the sexy part, and the you part. And part of the you pillar of the brand really is being unapologetically you, speaking your own truth, speaking your own mind, and not in any way, shape, or form in a screw you kind of way, but in a complete yay me way. Like, I'm not antagonistic. I'm not going to argue with someone about my opinion, nor do I need to feel that it's right. I just know that it's right for me, and I am entitled to that.
Yeah, I've got a great buddy of mine, lives out on the West Coast. He's a fitness guru. And he's polarizing. I mean, he is obnoxious. He is vulgar. I mean, he doesn't have one sentence that comes out of his mouth without cursing about something. And if you are not in the shape that he believes is the way to be in shape, I mean, he's just brutal. Now, that's just not my style, but that's just his brand. That's who he is. That's what he sings every day. And it's just, and he pisses off a lot of people, but it's him. And he wouldn't be anything else but him. Do you?
Yeah. And how else do you find your tribe if you're not in your full authenticity? That was one of the harder things as I navigated the journey at the beginning. It was, I really genuinely wanted to touch the whole world. And I realized that I'm not going to be for the whole world. Actually, one of the pieces that took the most courage for me to express to the world was my very soulful spiritual self, because since I was a little kid, I've seen spirits, or I have, felt energy, or I've heard things, or I've seen things, and I've known things that how the hell would I even know these things? And I know that it scared a lot of the adults around me. And so I was always told, you have a wild imagination, or, you're delusional, you're crazy, but playfully. And I was put into acting classes because, take that creativity and really throw that into something else, channel it somewhere else. And as I got older, and especially as I developed this brand and saw more and more people that I was working one-on-one with that were hiding elements of themselves, I asked myself, what are the elements of myself that I could let out even more so that I could live my truth even more? And it was to really start talking about that and to share that. And I started using it in coaching sessions. For a long time, I didn't share the messages or the visions that were coming through. And when I started to share it, I said, listen, I don't really know what this means or what this is. I'm not even going to try to interpret it, but I'm hearing, yellow school bus and orange socks. What does that mean? And they're like, tears. Oh my gosh, and so, or I'm seeing this, and so it was such a disservice to the people I was working with that I was keeping all these yummy, magical, juicy, messages to myself, thinking that, I'll be judged, or people think I'm weird, or, I'm going to be told I'm crazy and delusional again, and it's all over, it's like childhood all over again, all those like really deeply ingrained triggers. And it was the courage to be me and just say, screw it. And what has happened as a result is I'm able to find my tribe. There are people who have reached out to me, even people who are actually incredibly close to me my whole life, that I'm watching people give themselves permission to explore what they're hearing and seeing, that they're like, maybe I always thought that was just brain chatter, and now I'm realizing maybe I'm getting some messages. And to help guide women into their intuition, and to help allow women to listen to their body and the signals their body is sending them, to listen to what is the difference between insecurity or fear and intuition. And it's been one of the most liberating things that I have been able to do in this process.
Yeah, I get that. I actually have the same sense. I have to be in a place where I'm really centered, but things like that come to me as well. A couple of years ago, I hadn't talked to a buddy in probably about 2 years, but he was a close buddy. I said, I got to call him today. Just something. I'm just thinking about him. And his mom passed away that morning.
Wow. Yeah, and you honored that. It's actually, connecting with you, you're such a free, expressive, liberated soul. And I love the work that you do in the world, too. And I love the fact that, as this very masculine man, both in your stature and in your energy, to say, hey, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to take the man challenge. I'm going to read this book and see what it's all about. And, you're that person who you would not allow yourself to be in any kind of box that anyone would put you in. And you're very big on honoring yourself. So to hear that story, like, well, this may sound weird, but I'm just going to call him, who cares? Whatever. Yep. I'm just going to roll with it. Yep. And look at the magic and beauty that actually provides to you in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I love when I got divorced. Literally, I didn't get a subscription to Vogue, but I wanted to know what women were reading. There's so much disinformation out there. I wanted to understand, what their mindset was, what's going on, what are they being fed. I was on a journey to make sure that I became a better version of me, and the second time around, that I was going to learn from the mistakes that I made, and I was going to start with trying to understand as much as I could about women, period. Now, speaking of which, I got a follow-up question for you. As you're working with the women, some are in relationships, some are not in relationships. As they're starting to make a transformation, they're growing, they're changing, but many times their partner's not. How do you deal with that?
That's a great question. So when they're single, it's great, right? Because they constantly get to see the escalation in the types of partners they're attracting and manifesting. Like, oh wow, that guy is so much more quality than the guys that I was attracting 6 months ago. The ones who are in relationship, what I have noticed is there's a caveat here, because it depends on if all parties are both still in.
Meaning?
And well, so sometimes someone's already checked out.
Oh, okay. I understand.
Right? So if someone's already checked out, then there isn't much, you need two willing parties to two completely in parties.
I learned that lesson.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, oh, yeah. So
yeah. I thought I could actually change it for us. That didn't work too well.
Yes. So when you have someone who is disengaged, sometimes I see where people are chasing a ghost, basically, right? It's the idea of what they want it to be versus facing the reality of what it is. This person is mentally checked out. Yeah, I can make a change versus, I can change myself and see what happens.
Yeah.
And so
if I change myself, I can make them change themselves. They'll follow suit.
Yeah, I have an agenda that requires you to change as well.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is there's this magic in releasing expectation of anything other than fulfilling your own needs and life even more. And not to say that you don't focus on, a lot of times I coach people where, well, he's doing this and he's doing that and he's doing this. And I'm like, okay, well, what have you done lately to make him feel appreciated and loved? And you get crickets. Or actually, oh my gosh, one time someone said to me, well, he's no longer bringing flowers, and he's not, he used to be all of these different things that were so loving and kind, and he's not doing that anymore. And I'm like, cool. So let me ask you something. Did you do at the beginning of the relationship that you no longer do? They've been together 20 years. And she was like, I get a lot of the, screw you looks from people, but that's when I know I got the breakthrough.
Yeah.
And I got that look like, why are you, giving me this problem? It's not my problem. It's like, no, I'm giving you your power back, because basically if it's something that you're the common denominator in your failed relationships. So the good news about that means that you have the ability to say, yeah, what are the patterns that I was doing that maybe weren't serving the relationship, and what could I actually do that would be serving it? And oh, hey, by the way, at the beginning of our relationship when we were madly in love, how was I showing up? Who was I? And what was I doing different? And how could I go back to that? So understanding that when you have two people who love each other, it usually is pretty quickly, depending on how long the disconnect has been there, you can rekindle things. The original question, right, is what do you do as you grow? And so I'm going to answer this question based on if both parties are committed and one party is doing the work on themselves and the other one maybe isn't. The cool thing is that if they're synchronistic, so if you're a good match, it's also a good way to tell if you're in a relationship with someone who's a good match. They're energetically pulled along with you, and they'll benefit from the work that you're doing and be inspired to do that work as well. And if they're not a good fit, well, then you'll know that as well. So the common denominator in that situation, again, is you. Either way, it doesn't really, the outcome on whether or not they come along, either way it's happening for you and not to you. And either way you get to do your work, and either way you get to come out the version of you that you actually want to be, and then you get to create a life that you genuinely love living. So whenever someone tells me they got divorced, the first words out of my mouth is congratulations. And I genuinely say it with enthusiasm, because if you got a divorce, there was a reason that it wasn't working. And even if it was the person is sad and heartbroken because they didn't want it, but the person was cheating, well, this is happening for you, because now you get to be with someone who isn't going to cheat on you. In the moment, people may not be able to understand that, but later they always are.
It's funny because for the last 2 years of my marriage, it wasn't where I wanted it to be, and I was working really hard on it and really studying and really trying to create the relationship that I always wanted, needed, and desired. And it just wasn't going anywhere. And for example, every Sunday we would sit down and just have a check-in, how things are going. How am I meeting your needs? How are you meeting my needs? What can we do better next week in order to create an amazing relationship? And I did this for 2 years with no response from the other side. And people say, oh my God, how do you feel doing that for 2 years and not getting a response? I said, it wasn't fun, but I spent 2 years training myself to do this for my next relationship.
Oof. That is so true. And what you did was you got to walk away with no regrets. I really,
Yes, I that's a great point. I mean, I was all in. I was trying to do everything I could. And for whatever reason, I wasn't meeting her needs at the highest level, for whatever reason that was. Now she has the opportunity to create the relationship that she wants, needs, and desires. And so do I. So in the end, you're sad to see a relationship end, but to know what's now available and what's possible, that's exciting.
yeah. And also, there's a really big piece here that is, talk about where you focus. Where your focus goes, your energy flows. There's this piece around you can look at what you're going to lose if a relationship ends, which is where a lot of people get stuck and hang on for a lot longer. Or you could look at what you'll gain if the relationship ends. And you could do the same thing with your self-development. Some people say, well, if I grow, I might lose this person. And okay, well, what is it that you might gain? Well, I might actually, this person might come along with me. And oh, hey, by the way, like worst case scenario, the two of you don't work out. What did you gain? So for you, you gained the new neural pathway of constantly being immersed in this world of how can I please my woman, make her happy, and really create this thriving partnership. I mean, every time you talk about relationship, it's always thriving relationship. And that's for, I'm not going to participate in a relationship that's mediocre or even great. I want epic, I want legendary, I want thriving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, and not everyone does, because to a lot of people, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. And, and so I genuinely believe, though, that it's kind of like working out, right? Your muscles eventually get used to, it becomes, you work out once, and it is a lot of work, especially if you haven't worked out in a really long time. In the first week, the first month, the first 6 months, creating these new habits can feel very foreign and strange and uncomfortable, and it's a lot of work. And then it's almost like one day things just click, and it becomes a piece of your lifestyle. And it's a spinning analogy plate. The spinning plate analogy is, sometimes my brain goes faster than my mouth. The spinning plate analogy is basically where you take one thing that you focus on. So in this instance, as an example, it's thriving relationship, and that launch, that work that it takes to get that plate to spin and to be level and balanced, awesome. And then eventually it picks up enough of its momentum that it can spin on its own, and you could go to the next one and you could spin that one, and then you might have to come back and kind of touch point it, and and so this is what it is to create new neural pathways, to really say, what would it look like if I was thriving? What would it look like if I was living an epic and legendary life, as opposed to, it's cool, it's fine, no, it's good, things are good, it's great. I mean, listen to the sea of fines and great and goods that are out there. And as far as I'm concerned, that's settling for mediocrity.
No question.
Yeah. Actually, that's another thing that I say that I know triggers the crap out of people, is I say settling is for suckers. And when it triggers someone, it is. And it's funny, there are so many interviews where I've wanted, we've been, people are like, what do you, want to title this article? Or, you creative collaborations. And I'm like, ooh, what if we did this workshop, settling for suckers? And, there's not been a single person, even my editor, when we were doing the book and that whole creative process, I wanted the tagline to be settling is for suckers. And it was just, I constantly kept getting this feedback, like, that's really triggering. And, and now that I'm further along in the journey, I'm like, I don't care. Listen, it is, settling is for suckers. And if you're triggered, it means you're settling. And you could either be triggered by that, or you can be empowered by that. And typically when we're triggered, it's an opportunity to take our power back. It's an opportunity for us to change what we're doing. It's an opportunity for us to learn more about ourselves, and to use those moments of clients, whenever I tell them this, they're like, wait, what? To use those moments of being triggered and actually celebrate them. Like, yes, I found something that triggered me. And that's a game changer as well.
Yeah. A big part of my brand is execution. And a lot of people are like, ooh, execution, that sounds like death.
Yes.
Well, you know what? If you don't know how to execute, you're dead.
It's funny. I would never associate that word with death, but I have heard that before.
Oh, yeah. People are polarized by it all the time.
Yeah. And I'm like, really, death? I'm like, ooh, to me, that's power. I hear execution. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting shit done. Like, that's what I think. So, yeah, I mean, it's also a lot of times when people react to language or anything. It's what's going on in their own world. I think that's a piece where it goes back to being unapologetically you, is realizing you're never going to please everyone. And there's only one person that you are absolutely guaranteed you can please, and that's yourself. And so if you go from trying to please hundreds of people to trying to please one, which of the odds do you think you're going to have a better opportunity doing?
Yeah. And let's put a bow on this for the men that are listening. When I'm talking about meeting your woman's needs, wants, and desires, I am not talking about being a pleaser. I'm talking about understanding her needs, wants, and desires and meeting those at the highest needs, not trying to please her. There's a difference there. So
there's such a big difference, right? This goes back to...
Make the noise of a pleaser. And men confuse this all the time.
Okay, so
give the guys some coaching out there.
Yeah, this is like my worst date ever story, but it's really funny and I love it. So I was on a date. I used to do online dating years ago, and I just say that because I'm in a relationship now, but when I was single, I did online dating. And there was this gentleman. He was very attractive, and he was a teacher, and we were on eHarmony, and I really enjoy the value match of eHarmony, and also I feel like you really, between the questions and everything, you genuinely, I feel like you know what you're getting yourself into usually when you go on a date. So he had checked all the boxes, right? Like, nice guy, seemed to come from a really good family, was doing, he's a teacher, so he was doing something where, I feel like it was contributing in the world, and he seemed to be very heart space connected to it. So we are on the date, and it comes to the end, and he asks me to go on another date. And I got quiet, and I was like, I could lie to you. I'm a very honest, blunt person. And so I said, listen, I could lie to you, and I could give you my telephone number, and or because I think at that point it was only connection online. I said, we could go over this, and I could say, yeah, text me, and then, you could call me, and I could ignore your phone calls, or I could just be honest with you and say, I don't actually feel like there's a connection here. And he put his head down, and he said, this was a very insecure guy, and he said, and I'll explain the clues that showed me he was insecure, because I mirrored this back to him because he asked for it, because he asked me to. So he said, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah. And his head's down, and his shoulders are rolled forward, and he's getting quiet, and he's starting to tear up. And he said, this happens a lot, actually, where I have a really great date, and I feel like things are good, and then the women actually do what you said. They give us, they give me the go ahead, and yeah, that sounds great. And then I just never hear from them again. And he said, what is it that you feel like you didn't get the connection? Because I feel it. And I said, well, do you want me to be honest with you? Do you really want to hear the truth? And he said, yes. And I'm like, well, when I asked you what you did for fun, you said making other people happy is what I do for fun. And when I was like, right, but what do you do for fun? You just kept going back to pleasing others, making others happy. This is a very extreme version of this, right? But that is what makes me feel most happy. You didn't have a single thing that you were doing in your own life that lit you up, made you feel excited about your own life, and that's too much. If I'm going to be your world, that's too much. I've got too much going on. Like, you're not going to be my world. I want to be a priority, but if I'm the whole thing, that's too much pressure. It's the same thing. I mean, reverse it. If a woman is you're her whole world, that's too much pressure, right? It's too much energy. It's too much. And then I gave him some more feedback as far as, he wasn't making eye contact with me, and he. This is a gentleman who I found out later, he had lost like 300 pounds. So he was very good looking, but in his eyes, he was still the big guy, and he didn't really think he was attractive, and he didn't know how much he had to offer a woman. So this guy has a lot of work to do in his own life to genuinely talk about self-love, to love himself, right? This is a guy who, even if I had gone on another date, even if we had fallen in love, he never would have received the love. And that's another thing too, if you want to please me, but you're not doing it in a way where you have a backbone or you have boundaries or you're receiving anything from me, then there's like this imbalanced thing going on. I see this actually a lot with women as well that are pleasers. They're not open to receiving the love that they're giving, and eventually that erodes a relationship, because what ends up happening is, it's like, oh, that's so selfish. It's so selfish to not give the person the gift of giving you back something. So,
And what they'll do is they'll attract the taker.
That is 150% true. That's exactly right.
And then they find themselves in an abusive relationship.
Yeah, I found myself in those quite often. Yes, I'm very...
And it could be reversed, too. The men can also... They'll find a very masculine woman to be with that's a taker, and they'll be the pleaser.
Okay, so that's a huge point. Everyone has their own... It's not just men and women, right? There's masculine and feminine. And so if you're core... I actually met a woman recently who said, she understood this concept, and she was like, no, I'm core very masculine, and I love that. And she said, when I stopped dating masculine men and started dating feminine men, she said it changed my whole, like, I'm so happy now, and so yes, so it's really about, as I am a very feminine woman and I'm very powerful, but I'm very powerful in my femininity. I love playing in my goddess energy.
Very powerful.
Yeah, and I really own who I am, and yet at the same time, I'm like, hey, you've got muscles. Can you please carry this? Like, could I carry this? Sure, but you know what? That would make me feel like such a lady if you carried this for me. If you open my door, if you open my jar, that makes me feel like a lady. It doesn't take any power away from me to give you power. In fact, I feel more powerful as a woman when I give you even more power. And I feel like what happens when a man is pleasing a woman is he is in a more feminine energy pattern, and it completely imbalances if it's a feminine woman, right? Like a feminine woman, there's that, oh man, that power in masculinity is so sexy.
The pleaser wants a pat on the head.
Yeah, I'm not a dog trainer. In fact, I've done a really good job with my own dog, and she's wonderful, but she doesn't really listen to me. So, yeah, I mean, that would have been a relationship gone wrong. No bueno. So, yeah, I don't want a puppy. I want a man.
Great advice. Are you truly living your potential? Are you getting the results that you need, want, and desire? There was a time in my life where I was not, and I needed answers. For the last 16 years, I've been obsessed with the question of why some people achieve massive results and others do not. And I found out that it comes down to one thing: execution, and the ability to take your ideas and plans and dreams and turn them into reality. That led me to the question, what are peak performers doing that others are not doing? How do they think? How do they act? What is behind the science of execution? I have now uncovered the secrets to the science of execution, and I want to share them with you. I have an intensive 3-day event called the Business Execution Summit. If you are truly committed to taking your game to the next level and mastering the science of execution, the most important skill that you will ever acquire, simply take your phone and text the word BESUMMIT, one word, to 41411, and I'll send you out some additional information on our upcoming event. That concludes part 2 of our interview with Morgan Field. Please stay tuned later this week for part 3. Thank you so much for listening today. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope you found today's show valuable. If you would like to receive these shows automatically to your phone or to your computer, simply go to iTunes and subscribe. After listening to several of the shows, if you're so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating, as this helps us reach additional people and spread the message. If you're truly committed to taking your life to the next level and doing whatever it takes to become a peak performer, but something's holding you back, something is blocking your way, and you just can't seem to figure out what it is, send me an email to info@thorconklin.com, and I'd be more than happy to get on the phone with you. We'll schedule a 15-minute discovery call. No obligation, no cost. I absolutely love to hear from the listeners, and if there's something I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to do that. Also, if you found something of great interest in today's show and you want to share that with your friends and family, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode, hit the share button, and share it on your page. You can follow me at Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. We're constantly adding new free resources, discussing additional tricks, tips, tools, and strategies on how to be a peak performer. Remember, I try to keep these episodes short so you can listen to them during dot time, doing other things, commuting, driving, walking, working out. decide to be a peak performer in all that you do. And until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.